Salams from the People's Dispatch studios in New Delhi. I'm Siddhant Ani and you're watching Daily Debrief. On the show today, we have the latest on the Pegasus cyber weapon courtesy of a new New York Times investigation. We're talking about a break in the Iran nuclear deal discussions, and we have the latest on the US Navy's Red Hill fuel facility in Hawaii. First up, a New York Times investigation published yesterday reveals how Israel reaped the diplomatic gains around the world from the company NSO's Pegasus spyware. Reported by Ronen Bergman and Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist Mark Mazzetti, the 7,000 word piece carries valuable details of how governments and agencies, including the US's Federal Bureau of Investigation, use this most frightening of cyber weapons, as well as plans for expanding its application to an almost universal scale by routing hacks through social media platforms such as Facebook. Abdul, for those of us who don't have access or might not have access to the New York Times, let's start by summarizing for us, please, what you found to be the most key findings from this report.
As far as the report goes, it simply says that there are many governments, particularly the right-wing governments, the authoritarian, what we call authoritarian right-wing governments in countries like India or Poland or Hungary, including the Trump administration, the United States of America. They collaborated with the Israeli NSO and bought the Pegasus software, which most of these countries have denied doing that. So that is the central part of the piece, and the piece details when they were bought, at what time, what were the kind of negotiations, and how they were clubbed. The buying of the deal, buying of the software was clubbed with the other deals, so that kind of to give it a, what do you call it, the cherry picking, so that no one notices how it had happened. So in order to save it from the public scrutiny, they basically linked it with other kinds of bilateral agreements which they signed. So in a way, the involvement of Israeli state and how the NSO, which is kind of a private entity, the link between them and their use, the use of diplomatic platforms to kind of promote private entities, is basically the central piece of this report. The report, when we talk about India in particular, we see that how Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, in 2017 visited Israel. He was the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel, and in that particular atmosphere which was created around that visit, he signed a $2 billion deal. And though in public scrutiny, the idea of Pegasus did not appear. And in fact, they lied in the parliament also last year when the revolutions happened. So all these things are basically detailed in the report in particular. It also says how FBI in United States of America experimented with the software for years. The report says they finally ditched it. They did not use it. But yeah, that is one part. I think there are things yet to come. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. In the US, Abdul, it's surprising that they are now trying to, of course, ban the use of this weapon. But they first did try, like you said, experiment with it, tried to purchase it. That is perhaps the least surprising of the revelations. But since it is detailed that, or the piece starts with mention of how much sort of Israel gained diplomatically, could you give us some more details on that aspect of it?
See, Israel is trying for a very long time to kind of establish itself in the international politics. We all know that how because of its history, its colonial occupation of Palestine, and it has been isolated in the international diplomatic arena for a very long time. And there are many countries in the world who basically feel hesitated while having diplomatic relations, open diplomatic relations with Israel. So the biggest, you can say, the tool Israeli state has used to kind of gain acceptability in the larger international arena is develop certain kind of weaponry, certain kind of sophisticated technological equipments like the softwares like Pegasus, which basically provides states a space for maneuvering and kind of gives them a kind of camouflage to maintain their democratic, quote unquote, democratic credentials at the same time, and keep doing authoritarian human rights violations in whatever form possible. So since this gives a space to many right-wing governments across the globe, business related to softwares like Pegasus provides Israel that space which no other country can do. So Israel becomes, in a way, what do you call it? It cannot be. You cannot have a situation where you cannot have a relationship with Israel. So that basically, it has, the Pegasus software has basically established Israel's quote unquote importance or significance in the international politics, and particularly among the governments which earlier used to hesitate having open direct relationship. So technological, quote unquote, technological advancements which Israel has, it uses that, and particularly with the regressive authoritarian regimes throughout the world to establish diplomatic relationships. So it's open relationship with India, European countries, different European countries. US, it has been its close allies for long, so that is not a surprise. But several new countries in Africa bought these software. Countries in West Asia, which even today, despite the normalization deal and so on and so forth, have hesitancy of accepting Israel, have now, it has been revealed that they have been buying these kind of things from Israel for very long. So this basically is a way for Israel to get acceptance in international politics.
Fair enough. And also a story that has, I think, quite global sort of significance and resonance. So wherever you are watching the show, I'm sure there will be news reports that follow up on how specific governments in all of our countries kind of participated in this process, and then proceeded, of course, to continue to camouflage their involvement, and in some cases even lie to the public. So yeah, we will also be following up on some of these angles on peoplesdispatch.org. But for now, Abdul, we'll move on to the next story, and I'll ask you to hang around for that. The latest round of talks to salvage the Iran nuclear deal have been put on pause. The European Union's coordinator has said on Friday, calling for political decisions to break the deadlock. Diplomats have been meeting in the Austrian capital for several weeks straight in search for a breakthrough to revive the 2015 deal involving Iran, the United States, Britain, China, France, Germany, and Russia. The EU has played the role of mediator in these negotiations, and the chief negotiators for Britain, France, and Germany put out a statement saying, and I quote, "Everyone knows we are reaching the final stage, which requires political decisions. Negotiators are therefore returning to capitals for consultation." Russia put out a similar message as well. Abdul, it's encouraging to hear that we are in the late stages or the final stages of negotiations on this subject. What does that mean for Iran in terms of what has been set out in the 2015 agreement?
See, Iran has been, in last 8 rounds of negotiation, Iran has maintained its position, which is basically 3 things. All the sanctions which were imposed post Trump's withdrawal in 2018 should be taken back first. The second thing is those withdrawal of sanctions should be verified in a time-bound manner, whether those sanctions are really withdrawn, because many times the sanctions on paper they withdraw, but indirect way may, for example, Iran has alleged that Obama, when he signed the nuclear deal in 2015, even after the signing of the deal, it has pressurized indirectly international banking system not to deal with Iran, which was a violation of the agreement. So that kind of indirect violations need to be checked, and there should be a process through which we can verify that those sanctions are actually lifted. That is the second demand. And third demand is the guarantee that this should not be a short-term agreement. A new president comes tomorrow and withdraws from the deal again. So which basically defeats the purpose, and it goes back, everything goes back to point zero. So these were the three major demands which Iranians had put before the commencement of the 8th round of the negotiations, or in the late December. If what we are hearing in the media, because the details of the draft agreed upon is not public. So whatever we are hearing from media, reading in different kinds of sources, they are saying that the technicalities related to all these demands have been by and large agreed upon.
Right.
We don't know the details of it again, but the by and large, these three things have been sorted out, and it means only the Joe Biden administration in the US has to agree, basically, that on those technicalities. That's the political process. Whether they will agree or not, that is a different question altogether, because we all know that they are trying to link it with some other things which are related to the larger geopolitical issues in the region.
Yeah, fair enough. So I suppose at this stage we're not in a position to really comment on what some of that political sort of maneuvering behind the scenes will be. But how soon, in your opinion, can we expect a resumption of dialogue, if not a final agreement?
As per the statements made by different representatives who were participating in the talks in Vienna, they are saying February 1st week, February 2nd week, everything will be by and large sorted out. But we should not be too optimistic about it. As I said, there are larger geopolitical considerations which particularly the Joe Biden administration is putting behind the final going back to the deal. They have talked about the US Special Representative for Iran, Robert Mueller, has said that has brought basically a new issue altogether into it, that until the 4 US citizens jailed in Iran are released, the final settlement on the JCPO will not be, should not be done. That is one thing. Then US has been pitching for a very long time about including some aspects of Iran's regional policies in West Asia into before they finalize the deal. So those issues are still there. Iran has refused to engage with these things, and it has stuck to the one point that the JCPO negotiations are only about the JCPO, the nuclear deal, nothing beyond that. The one major thing is the Iranian foreign minister, the new foreign minister in Iran, has, for the first time in last 3 years, this is the first indication that he gave first indication that Iran is ready to have direct negotiations with the United States, which is, you can say, a big change in Iranian attitude, which we have seen in last 3 years. Earlier, Iranian establishment has refused to have direct negotiations with the United States, and it has basically, even the Vienna talks, which are happening, are indirectly, indirect negotiations are happening. So that indicates that after the basic technicalities are agreed upon, the larger political issues, Iran is ready to engage with.
Discuss.
There is a space now. There is a scope that the Iran is also open to negotiate its other issues, but after the JCPO things are, the details are agreed upon. Or so this is you can say Iran is pushing for a post-agreement scenario at this particular moment for direct talks with the US, which is one of the major outcomes of this round of talk.
All right, fair enough. Thanks for that update, Abdul. And I think We will have hopefully more on that very soon. For our final story, we had reported in December last year on leaks at a US Navy fuel storage facility in Hawaii, one that dates back to World War II. This leak, contaminated the drinking water pumped to over 90,000 residents of Oahu. After initially resisting the Hawaii administration's order, the US Navy finally said earlier this month that it will comply. The US Navy caused this problem. We own it and we're going to fix it, is what was said by Rear Admiral Blake Converse, who is the Deputy Commander of the US's Pacific Fleet. For a ground perspective on what this means, let's check out this report from Globetrotter Chief Correspondent Vijay Prasad.
This crisis takes place in Hawaii, of course, which has been an occupied nation held militarily by the United States since 1893 when they overthrew our government. The Red Hill Fuel Storage Facility represents a long history of U.S. military occupation here. Red Hill, or the area known as Red Hill, along with over a third of Hawaiian land in general, was taken by the U.S. military for its operations, especially around World War II. And so that's when these tanks were built. Red Hill's fuel storage facility is this underground fuel storage facility that holds up to 250 million gallons of petroleum. And it was built just around the outbreak of World War II. And so these tanks are situated about 100 feet directly above our main source aquifer. So for those who don't know what an aquifer is, it's the primary water source for the island of Oahu. And so this island has almost 800,000 to 1 million people on it. And so this source aquifer provides water for all of them. And the Navy's fuel tanks are directly over it, which have been leaking over their almost 80-year history. They've leaked almost 76 times, of which we only knew about the first leak in 2014. These tanks were only declassified into public knowledge in 1994. And so for the majority of their history, we've actually been unaware of their existence and the fact that they've been actively leaking fuel into our water source. And so in November of last year, late November, it was revealed that thousands of people were smelling gasoline in their homes when they turned on their faucets. Thousands of people, hundreds of people were being admitted to the ER and to the hospital with chemical burns in the mouth from drinking their water, with symptoms of jet fuel contamination in their bodies, outbreaking in rashes, vomiting, headaches, really serious symptoms that caused them to be admitted to the hospitals. People had to be evacuated from their homes because it was no longer safe for them to live there. And this wasn't just military families. The military families have unfortunately been getting all of the press, but numerous civilian communities have also been contaminated and have received no restitution from the military. The military knew about the contamination of the water since July of 2021 and withheld and smothered the information and evidence until it became public in November of last year, because people were sent to the hospital, and only then did the military admit it. And they kept it from the state and local governments as well, despite the fact that usually the state and the military are usually aligned in acting against the interests of the people. And so the military and the state of Hawaii have had to shut down multiple water wells that service well over 400,000 people in Hawaii. And almost 100,000 people, mainly military personnel, have been displaced from their homes. And so this is a really major unfolding crisis, because never before in the history of Hawaii has our water been threatened in such a major way. The Board of Water Supply, which is the utility of water management and water resources for the island of Oahu, says that if something is not done soon, we may never be able to drink our water again. It may be permanently contaminated, which is, like I said, unprecedented. It has never happened in our 1,000-year history in this land. And the US military has managed to do it in a little under 80 years. And so this is a major significant crisis, because Hawaii is on many scales, because not only is this water necessary for sustaining life in Hawaii, it's necessary on many other levels. Hawaii is unfortunately undergoing a massive living cost crisis of Native people, indigenous people being forced from their homes because they can no longer afford it. If the cost of water goes up because we have to import it, that's another major issue. This plays into another problem of Hawaiian independence. We have not had control of our land for 129 years now. And the US military has again and again continually abused and desecrated and damaged our land, whether it's through live fire bombings, whether it's through the storage of chemical weapons, whether it's through the pollution destruction of land, like here at Red Hill. This is a really long-standing issue, and if something is not done soon, we may never be able to drink our water again, like I said. And the military has continued to suppress information about this, to do nothing about it, to try and play it off until they can just say the water is safe again. Just today, actually, there was a news story came out. It was leaked that the U.S. military now has reports on the leaks that occurred over the past year and is refusing to release them. And so this is critical information that tells us how many gallons were leaked into the water, what the contamination looks like. Are the tanks actively continuing to leak? Is the leak stopped? Is it contained, or is it continuing? How is the water moving, or the water and the fuel moving in this underground aquifer? Currently, it threatens. We have over 3 wells that are shut down. Is it going toward other wells across the island that service other areas? We've lost 20% of our access to drinking water currently. 20% of our capacity to feed water to the island is gone because of the wells that have been shut down. So every other well on the island is having to pick up the slack. And so we may see a water shortage next summer in the hot months. The Board of Water Supply has said water rationing is very likely. They've already been putting out information about asking people to be cautious of water use, to turn off the water if you're washing your hands, to turn off the water if you're brushing your teeth. Even what seem like really minor ways of conserving water. That's how worried the water management utility is about what we may be facing in the future. And water shortages have almost never happened here in Hawaii. We live in a very abundant land of resources, thankfully. Our ancestors chose a really great place to live. And yet now we're seeing these major resource shortages because the US military has come in and destroyed really vital agricultural land to feed our people. We already import over 80% of our food, and now we may be forced to import a large percentage of our water because we can no longer safely source it from our own island.
That's all we have on the show for today. From me and the entire People's Dispatch team, thank you very much for watching. For more on all of these stories, you can visit our website, peoplesdispatch.org, and do give us a follow on all the regular social media platforms for updates. We'll be back again next week. See you then. Until then, stay safe. Goodbye.